You'll hear a number of different recordings and you'll have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you'll have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you'll be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You'll hear 2 tourists, Sally and Peter, talking in a coffee shop. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Oh, Peter, there you are. You've been ages. What kept you so long?
I'm sorry I'm so late, Sally. Have you been waiting long?
Oh, half an hour. But it doesn't matter. I've had a coffee and I've been reading this guidebook for tourists. Sit down. You look very hot and tired. What would you like to drink?
I'd love a really chilled mineral water or something. Will you have another coffee?
Yes, I will. The waitress will be back in a moment. Why were you so late? Did something happen?
Yes. You know, I went to the bank to cash some traveller's checks. Well, the exchange rate was looking healthy, but when I went to the teller, they told me the computer system was temporarily down, so they couldn't do any transactions. They said the problem would be fixed in a few minutes, so I waited. And then I started talking to another guy in the bank, and I forgot the time.
Really? Someone you met in the bank? Does he work there?
No, he was a tourist from New York. His name's Henry, and he's been here for a week, but he's moving on to Germany tomorrow. He's an architect, and he's spending 4 weeks traveling around Europe.
Just like us?
Yeah, just like us. He told me the names of some places where we should eat. Great food and not too expensive, he said. Oh, and he also gave me this map of the bus system. He said he didn't need it anymore.
Oh, that's useful. Pity he's moving on tomorrow. Here's the waitress. Let's order. Do you want anything to eat, or shall we just have a drink?
Well, I'm hungry, and we've got a lot of sightseeing to do, so let's just have a snack and a drink.
Sounds good to me.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Well, let's decide what we'll see today. I guess the best place to start is the cathedral, and then the castle. What are the opening times for those two?
Well, according to this guidebook, the cathedral is only open from 9:30 in the morning until midday. Oh, no, hang on. That's the Cathedral Museum. The cathedral itself is open morning and afternoon. The castle is just open from 1 to 5, so we can't go there until after lunch. I really want to spend some time in the art gallery, because they've got this wonderful painting by Rembrandt that I've always wanted to see.
What else should we see?
Well, the guidebook says the botanical gardens are worth spending some time in, and they're open all day from 8 to 6, so we can go there any time. I'd like to go to the markets near the river too, but, oh, no, wait, that's only in the mornings too.
As well as today and tomorrow, we can see some other places on Monday, you know. But I don't think the markets will be open then. They only open on Thursdays, so we've missed them for this week. Maybe we should go to the cathedral today because it's Sunday tomorrow, and even though it's open every day, it might be more difficult to get in tomorrow because of the church services.
That's true. But the art gallery isn't open on Sundays at all, so we'll have to go there today. The castle's open every day except Mondays, so we're okay there. And the gardens, of course, only close at night.
Are all these places free, or do we have to pay to go in? What does the guidebook say?
I think there's a charge for all of them, except the botanical gardens. Oh, and the markets. Of course you don't pay to go in.
Okay. Well, it looks like our plan is this. We'll go to see the painting you like first, the Rembrandt, then have lunch and go on to the castle after that, and then the cathedral.
Okay. It says here that the roof of the cathedral is really beautiful.
Is that right? What I really want to do at the cathedral is climb the tower. The view is supposed to be spectacular.
OK, well, that'll be more than enough for today. Then tomorrow, let's go to the botanical gardens and have a picnic. I want to sit by the river and watch the swans. This city's famous for them.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide talking to a group of tourists who are about to visit an English castle. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
We'll be arriving at Branley Castle in about 5 minutes. But before we get there, I'll give you a little information about the castle and what our visit will include. So, in fact, there's been a castle on this site for over 1100 years. The first building was a fort constructed in 914 AD for defence against Danish invaders by King Alfred the Great's daughter, who ruled England at the time. In the following century, after the Normans conquered England, the land was given to a nobleman called Richard de Vere, and he built a castle there that stayed in the de Vere family for over 400 years. However, when Queen Elizabeth I announced that she was going to visit the castle in 1576, it was beginning to look a bit run down. And it was decided that rather than repair the guest rooms, they'd make a new house for her, out of wood, next to the main hall. She stayed there for 4 nights, and apparently it was very luxurious. But, unfortunately, it was destroyed a few years later by fire. In the 17th century, the castle belonged to the wealthy Fennis family, who enlarged it and made it more comfortable. However, by 1982, the Fennis family could no longer afford to maintain the castle, even though they received government support, and they put it on the market. It was eventually taken over by a company who owned a number of amusement parks. But when we get there, I think you'll see that they've managed to retain the original atmosphere of the castle. When you go inside, you'll find that in the staterooms, there are lifelike moving wax models dressed in costumes of different periods in the past, which even carry on conversations together. As well as that, in every room, there are booklets giving information about what the room was used for and the history of the objects and furniture it contains. The castle park's quite extensive. At one time, sheep were kept there, and in the 19th century the owners had a little zoo with animals like rabbits and even a baby elephant. Nowadays, the old zoo buildings are used for public displays of paintings and sculpture. The park also has some beautiful trees, though the oldest of all, which dated back 800 years, was sadly blown down in 1987. Now, you're free to wander around on your own until 4:30, but then, at the end of our visit, we'll all meet together at the bottom of the great staircase. We'll then go on to the long gallery, where there's a wonderful collection of photographs showing the family who owned the castle 100 years ago having tea and cakes in the conservatory. And we'll then take you to the same place where afternoon tea will be served to you.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, if you can take a look at your plans, you'll see Branley Castle has 4 towers joined together by a high wall, with the river on 2 sides. Don't miss seeing the Great Hall. That's near the river in the main tower, the biggest one, which was extended and redesigned in the 18th century. If you want to get a good view of the whole castle, you can walk around the walls. The starting point's quite near the main entrance. Walk straight down the path until you get to the south gate, and it's just there. Don't go on to the north gate. There's no way up from there. There'll shortly be a show in which you can see archers displaying their skill with a bow and arrow. The quickest way to get there is to take the first left after the main entrance and follow the path past the bridge. Then you'll see it in front of you at the end. If you like animals, there's also a display of hunting birds, falcons and eagles and so on. If you go from the main entrance in the direction of the south gate, but turn right before you get there instead of going through it, you'll see it on your right, past the first tower. At 3 p.m, there's a short performance of traditional dancing on the outdoor stage. That's right at the other side of the castle from the entrance and over the bridge. It's about 10 minutes walk or so. And finally, the shop. It's actually inside one of the towers, but the way in is from the outside. Just take the first left after the main entrance, go down the path and take the first right. It's got some lovely gifts and souvenirs. Right, so we're just arriving.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You'll hear 3 friends discussing an assignment they're going to work on together. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Oh, there you are, good. Sorry I'm a bit late. There was a long queue. So, have you worked out how to deal with this assignment then?
Not yet. We've only been here a couple of minutes ourselves.
Can you just remind me what the task is exactly?
Well, there are three parts to it. First, we've got to write an essay about ways of collecting data. Then...
What's the title of the essay exactly?
I've got it here. Assess the two main methods of collecting data in social science research.
And how much do we need to write?
1,500 words. That's for the essay. Then for the second part of the assignment, we have to choose one method of data collection and carry out a small-scale study, making appropriate use of the method chosen to gather data from at least 5 subjects.
And then we have to write a report on the study?
That's right, of 3,000 to 4,000 words.
Did you get as far as discussing which form of data collection we should go for? Questionnaire or interview, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we should use a questionnaire. It'll be so much less time-consuming than organising interviews, I reckon. Once we've agreed on the wording of it, we only have to send it out and wait for the responses.
Yes, I think it probably would be quicker. But what did that article he gave us last week say about the quality of data from questionnaires?
I'm pretty sure it recommended questionnaires as a source of highly reliable data. As long as you design the questionnaire properly in the first place, the data will be fine.
No, I'm sure it talked about drawbacks as well, didn't it? Something about the response rate and the problems you get if it's too low?
Yeah, but we only need data from 5 subjects anyway.
Oh, I suppose so. Another drawback I remember it mentioned was that questionnaire data tends not to reveal anything unexpected because it is limited to the questions fixed in advance by the researcher.
Come on, Rosa, this is only a practice. It's not meant to be real research, is it?
Well, not sure about that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Maybe I'd better go through the article again, just to be sure. Can you remember what it was called?
Sample Surveys in Social Science Research, I think. By Mehta.
M-E-H-T-A?
Yeah. And he also recommended a more recent book called Survey Research by Bell, I think. It's in that series published by London University.
And if we try to use interviews instead, I saw a book in the departmental library that'll be helpful. It's called Interviews That Work by Wilson, published in Oxford in 1988.
Right. Oh, I've got a tutorial now. Can we meet up again later this week? What about Friday morning?
Suits me. 11 o'clock?
Fine.
Before Friday, I think we should all look through the reading list.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecture about the history of weather forecasting. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In this series of lectures about the history of weather forecasting, I'll start by examining its early history. That'll be the subject of today's talk. Okay, so we'll start by going back thousands of years. Most ancient cultures had weather gods, and weather catastrophes, such as floods, played an important role in many creation myths. Generally, weather was attributed to the whims of the gods, as the wide range of weather gods in various cultures shows. For instance, there's the Egyptian sun god Ra, and Thor, the Norse god of thunder and lightning. Many ancient civilizations developed rites such as dances in order to make the weather gods look kindly on them. But the weather was of daily importance. Observing the skies and drawing the correct conclusions from these observations was really important. In fact, their survival depended on it. It isn't known when people first started to observe the skies, but at around 650 BC, the Babylonians produced the first short-range weather forecasts, based on their observations of clouds and other phenomena. The Chinese also recognized weather patterns, and by 300 BC, astronomers had developed a calendar which divided the year into 24 festivals, each associated with a different weather phenomenon. The ancient Greeks were the first to develop a more scientific approach to explaining the weather. The work of the philosopher and scientist Aristotle in the 4th century BC is especially noteworthy, as his ideas held sway for nearly 2,000 years. In 340 BC, he wrote a book in which he attempted to account for the formation of rain, clouds, wind, and storms. He also described celestial phenomena such as halos, that is, bright circles of light around the sun, the moon, and bright stars, and comets. Many of his observations were surprisingly accurate. For example, he believed that heat could cause water to evaporate, but he also jumped to quite a few wrong conclusions, such as that winds are breathed out by the earth. Errors like this were rectified from the Renaissance onwards. For nearly 2,000 years, Aristotle's work was accepted as the chief authority on weather theory. Alongside this, though, in the Middle Ages, weather observations were passed on in the form of proverbs, such as red sky at night, shepherd's delight, red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning. Many of these are based on very good observations and are accurate, as contemporary meteorologists have discovered. For centuries, any attempt to forecast the weather could only be based on personal observations. But in the 15th century, scientists began to see the need for instruments. Until then, the only ones available were weather vanes, to determine the wind direction, and early versions of rain gauges. One of the first, invented in the 15th century, was a hygrometer, which measured humidity. This was one of many inventions that contributed to the development of weather forecasting. In 1592, the Italian scientist and inventor Galileo developed the world's first thermometer. His student Torricelli later invented the barometer, which allowed people to measure atmospheric pressure. In 1648, the French philosopher Pascal proved that pressure decreases with altitude. This discovery was verified by English astronomer Halley in 1686, and Halley was also the first person to map trade winds. This increasing ability to measure factors related to weather helped scientists to understand the atmosphere and its processes better, and they started collecting weather observation data systematically. In the 18th century, the scientist and politician Benjamin Franklin carried out work on electricity and lightning in particular, but he was also very interested in weather and studied it throughout most of his life. It was Franklin who discovered that storms generally travel from west to east. In addition to new meteorological instruments, other developments contributed to our understanding of the atmosphere. People in different locations began to keep records, and in the mid-19th century, the invention of the telegraph made it possible for these records to be collated. This led, by the end of the 19th century, to the first weather services. It was not until the early 20th century that mathematics and physics became part of meteorology, and we'll continue from that point next week.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.